Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Film Music House during the Sundance Film Festival. My name is Tegan Dorman, and I'm here with composer T. Griffin, who has recently scored for the documentary Second Chance, which is in the running for the US documentary feature competition. So, with all that said, let's get started. And thank you so much for being here today. T, how are you doing?
I'm good. Nice to see you, Tegan.
Amazing. I am also doing well, and I'm really excited to learn more about this particular score. So, can you please tell me just a little bit about this film and kind of how you ended up working on this project?
Yeah, sure. So Second Chance is it's a documentary film by Ramin Bahrani about Richard Davis, who invented the modern bulletproof vest.
Mhm.
And I learned about it because an editor that I had worked with before, Aaron Wickenden, was working on it, and he recommended me to Ramin that we should talk. And we had a Zoom over the summer, and I watched the movie, and I was just really, really entranced by it. And then we had a great connection, like sort of right away, as we talked about the themes in the film and what their sort of vision was for it.
Okay, very cool. And I mean, was there a specific vision or route that the director that you just mentioned wanted to take in regards to kind of the film's sound and the score? Like some key points that you had to keep in mind when creating for this piece?
I don't know that at the outset there was a specific like score vision, but it there was a very, very specific like line of inquiry um, uh, in the film, which to really struck me when I watched it, which was this sort of really grappling with a very complicated morality. And I think we entered the project sort of as collaborators grappling with that. And I started working on it when it was, maybe a rough cut, but fairly early, and we worked on it for maybe 5 or 6 months. I mean, it was
Wow.
quite a long time to sort of marinate in the themes of the film. And it's a movie that it's not verite, it's archival material, and it has sort of Ramin's voiceover, where he's sort of explicitly grappling with this person. And Richard Davis is a very complicated individual, very, very compelling, and sort of dangerous and theatrical in an extremely Midwestern way,
Okay.
which, as someone, my parents are Midwestern, I lived in the Midwest for a while, I just immediately connected with this world. And yeah, and so that was, I don't remember us talking about the sound of the music at first. It was really questions of like, what are we trying to say?
Okay.
And from that, I think I had sort of an instinct from the world that all of the people were in, that it was this. I mean, you say Americana, but that can mean so many sort of cliched things. But to me, this phrase, when I initially watched the film, this phrase came into my head that was used to describe this album, or the set of albums called the American Anthology of Folk Music from the 50s. I think it came out of the early 60s. And it was described as the music of the old weird America. And that phrase like was kind of like banging around in my head as I was watching it the first time. And at the end of the movie, there's a piece of music by Blind Willie Johnson that's from that album.
Okay.
And so it just, like, to me there was like just like this sort of like connection that was very deep. And the time in which the story takes place is really sort of the 60s through the mid 90s, all the way up until a year ago.
Okay.
So it's not an old, it's not an ancient place that we're going to, but it feels ancient. And so I wanted to sort of evoke that in the music.
Okay. Very cool. Well, then I guess building off of that, how would you personally describe the sound and feeling to this score? Like, would you use the words like very weird, old American, like, or
Definitely.
yeah,
Well, definitely. I mean, to me, it was, you know, it's not super like country or blues or whatever. It's almost like there's an element of it that's almost sort of medieval. So it's this sort of medieval Gothic country.
right? It's
I don't know if
definitely
that's
a
a
hodgepodge
Sirius
of
FM
a lot of
station.
different things. I know when I first listened to it, I thought it was a totally unexpected sound for a documentary,
Oh,
personally.
good.
Yeah, it really took me by surprise, and I think it's gonna really like kind of grip viewers in and just be like, "What am I watching?" in a good way, because that's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
Richard's personality and story, right? Like, what is going on? What am I watching? Like, how does
Yeah, totally. And I think the other thing that really drew me in watching is that without spoiling it, there is this sort of very strange, sort of degraded theatricality about it, but there's also something that's just extremely human,
right?
mostly in the sort of the characters around, sort of the chorus of characters around Richard. But to me, that impulse is there throughout. Like the sort of the I think Ramin talked a lot about trying to maintain the pathos and maintain our experience of Richard as a human in a community, even though we uncover very sort of troubling things that he's involved in.
Okay, so instead of making him kind of a caricature almost, you're trying to respect that he is, he's a person. Everyone makes mistakes, right? And this is just his story. And you're trying to tell that in a very almost objective manner, maybe?
No. I think it was definitely not objective. I think it's with the voiceover and everything about it, the way it's shot. It's definitely an sort of an essay.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say objective, but I would definitely say humanizing.
Okay.
And I think in a way, being explicit and sort of embracing your own subjectivity as as a group of people making this film is is almost a form of objectivity, because you're sort of including your own sort of framing in the in what you're creating for people.
Okay. Very cool. Well, I'm curious to know, I guess, and I'm sure everyone else is here, what instruments did you use to create this score to
Yeah,
achieve
so
this
yeah,
project?
so it's actually it's very, very specific, and it came from these discussions. Um, so the score is centered on the bassoon and the pedal steel, and those are
That
really
you don't
like,
hear about often.
yeah, and to me it was a surprise, and it was a bit of a it was part of an exploration in the early stages of working on it. And I had written some of the music, and I was playing it, I think, mostly on guitar, and we were sort of talking about this kind of like Americana sound and sort of embracing that, but it felt a little familiar.
Yeah.
And so Ramin said, I really want to hear an unusual instrument, an instrument that I don't expect, that can really be the voice of Richard, this sort of complicated, solitary character who's in the center of all of this activity, all of this community. And partly because I had just worked with a bassoon player that I really enjoyed working with, I was like, well, let me write some stuff for that, and let's try it out. And so that I wrote melodies and sort of played them for him. He was like, well, that could be interesting. And then I brought Joy Guidry, the bassoon player, in and just recorded a bunch of stuff. And I think it was immediately, we were like, that's the sound.
Mhm.
That's the sound. And this was fairly early on, so we got to really kind of like explore it, and really explore how it functioned, in terms of the narrative. And in the bassoon becomes this sort of solo voice that's nestled in all of this sort of gnarled percussion and banjos and guitars, all of which is very sort of degraded and recorded, through old weird microphones. And then this layer of pedal steel, which is extremely pure.
Yeah.
And I saw that as the kind of the Greek chorus in a way, kind of this community morality or something that sort of hovered over it. And I just love the way those two instruments sort of spoke to each other and sat together, because they're very separate, but then they sort of occupy the space together in a really interesting and lovely way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you definitely delivered on wanting to find a unique pairing with both of those instruments. I don't think I can remember the last time that a bassoon was like the main instrument in a film score. So
What's going to be all over. 2022 is going to be the year of the bassoon.
You're a trendsetter already. Well, then, going off of that, do you actually have a favorite cue in the score, and why?
That's a good question. Well, there's a cue that there's a point in the film where we sort of go into Richard's family and sort of his family history, and I think it's a very humanizing moment, not in the sort of most obvious way, because it's a very sort of weird family. So there's a cue that enters that part of the story, and it's maybe halfway into the movie, I think, where, to me, I think a lot of things come together. It was the first one that I really like. It was like pedal, steel, and bassoon, and it was, I mean, the title right now is the steel bassoon duet. And to me, that hooked everything together and sort of unlocked a lot of stuff for me. So in a way, it's my favorite, because in the process, it's the one that kind of opened a real door.
Okay. When that wasn't like the first kind of area that you tackled, right, with the film? No. Okay. That came much later.
Well, I don't really remember. I mean, my process for everything, and this as well, is really, I stay away from the movie for a while. I don't score the picture initially, and I just am trying to sort of work through my response to the film by recording and playing. And I don't like write out music and then mock it up and then have people record it. I'm in the studio. I just start, recording different stuff, and it's really driven by what I can play and what's already plugged in and stuff like that. Now, I probably recorded 15 or 20 little short pieces just to start, bouncing things back and forth. So by the time I was writing these themes that are actually I think that not very much of that music. A lot of times that music becomes a real part of the score. For this, I think most of it happened after I had sort of unlocked some of these melodic themes that are in that piece.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. That's very cool. That you probably get the story in your head, right? Of like, okay, it's kind of what it's about, and then you just get to work playing around with different sounds.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I think that's a way of trying to surprise yourself and trying to create unexpected, combinations of things. I think if you turn on the movie and start just noodling around on the piano or whatever and try to sort of interact with the picture in that way, to me that often ends up with something that feels just surface level, that instead of really like taking in the feeling of the film first and then putting it back out through your own frame, and then trying to like sort of collage it together, is a lot of times how I work. And then once things are defined, then the work of really making everything work for each little part of the film happens. But a lot of the development for me is I'm away from the movie itself.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that about your process. Very cool. Um, I'm curious to know, what did working on this specific project kind of mean to you personally?
That's a good question. I was very, very moved by the ending of the film, and I think that it sort of reveals the first three quarters of the movie are entertaining and very compelling, and I think grapple with a lot of, like, sort of open up a lot of these themes of responsibility to one another as people, and what it means to have a sort of a central figure in a community who is so powerful and so um, complicated, which I think a lot of people experience. And At the end of the film, we really go into what forgiveness is, and what sort of responsibility to one another as people are. And to me, that was very moving, and I feel like that informed a lot of my choices about the music before that theme is fully revealed. And so it's something that, I worked on it for a long time. I feel like I sat with that a long time, and that's something that you really, you sort of, everyone, I think, sort of struggles within themselves, and sees in the world around them. So that was, I think, that the thing about the movie that really kind of like entered my life in the most sort of present way.
Interesting. That's awesome. I like I like all of that. It just feels very genuine and like, um I'm assuming, since I haven't seen the movie, that it ends on a good note, maybe. Like with the
I think that it would be great to go into the movie assuming that.
Okay.
That's all I would say.
Fair enough, fair enough. And I mean, overall, this film, it's a little bit different from most of your past projects in the sense that, it's pretty narrative driven. And with that being said, did you find any unexpected challenges when composing for this type of project versus like past ones?
That's an interesting question. I did not. I mean, I honestly, this was a movie that I think I would felt very, very clear
Okay.
about what Ramin was was searching for, not in the music, but in the film.
Mhm.
And then he was just a wonderful collaborator in that he really knew what he wanted, but he didn't know, or he was very open in terms of how to get it.
Mhm.
And so I just found the discussions about what my choices as a composer meant in the movie just incredibly sophisticated and rich. And that was, it was I guess the only challenge about that is to really sort of rise to the occasion as much as possible. Um, yeah, I would say that I've done a lot of challenging projects, and this one actually was just a pleasure.
Well, that's great. Even better for you. Well, thank you so much for this amazing insight to this project. I'm really looking forward to being able to watch it and see everything come together. And thank you all for tuning into Film Music House and all of your time today, T. I know you're a busy, busy man. So for more video content, please be sure to follow us on YouTube, and everyone have a great day.